Jenny Lam, TVB News.
In other news, the government's political reform plans are facing a legal challenge. A man has filed a high court writ seeking a judicial review on the grounds that the government's proposals violate the Basic Law. The applicant, Law Hon Wing, wants the latest report by the Constitutional Development Task Force to be declared invalid. He claims it violates Annex 2 of the Basic Law, which states that the Legislative Council shall be composed of 60 members in each term. The government has proposed expanding the number of seats to 70, starting in 2008. In response to the legal challenge, the government says the proposals were made in accordance with the Basic Law and an interpretation by the National People's Congress Standing Committee last year. Violence has marred the Summit of the Americas in Argentina. Hundreds of anti-U.S. protesters clashed with riot police, set a bank ablaze, and looted shops as U.S. President George W. Bush and other leaders attended the summit nearby. Eve Lam reports.
Riot police fired multiple rounds of tear gas to disperse the angry crowd in the seaside resort of Mar del Plata. Protesters smashed through the windows of a bank and torched the building. Other nearby shops were also targeted, angry demonstrators dragging out whatever they could find to fuel bonfires in the street. Police said 64 people were arrested. The clashes erupted just 600 meters from where the 34-nation Summit of the Americas is being held.
This is not easy to host all these countries, particularly not easy to host perhaps me.
The violence followed an earlier peaceful rally against the U.S.'s free trade agenda. Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez and former Argentine soccer great Diego Maradona were in attendance. Chavez said earlier the proposed free trade area of the Americas, or FTAA, is dead and, quote, "we are going to bury it here." Washington is hoping to win a commitment to revive talks on the FTAA next year. Opposition from Latin America's big economies over U.S. agriculture subsidies blocked it this year. Leaders at the summit are split on whether to mention the FTAA in their final declaration. Eve Lam, TVB News.
More than 1,000 people have staged a peace rally in France after 9 straight nights of violence plunged the country into chaos. They filed past burned-out vehicles, demanding calm and an end to the week-long unrest. Marchers held up banners reading "No to violence" and "Yes to dialogue." The rally came after the situation took a sharp turn for the worse last night. Authorities made more than 200 arrests in their largest sweep as far, as the disturbances spread from Paris to several other cities. More on that from Jeremy Austin.
A showdown on the streets of France. This youth was taken in by the police for a suspected arson attack. He was among more than 200 people arrested on the 9th straight night of unrest in the country, during which more than 750 vehicles, several warehouses and a nursing school were torched. There are now signs the trouble is spreading. Besides Paris and its suburbs, Toulouse and Nice in the south, and Lille and Rennes in the north also reported disturbances. The spotlight is now on President Jacques Chirac's government as it struggles to contain the country's worst unrest since student riots in 1968. Last night, Prime Minister Dominique de Villepin held a crisis meeting with Interior Minister Nicolas Sarkozy, who's come under fire for his hardline stance towards the rioters. Many see the violence, which was sparked by the accidental electrocution of 2 teenagers last week, as symptomatic of the despair and discontent among France's have-nots, especially its immigrant population. But Sarkozy, who has presidential ambitions of his own in 2007, has vowed to clean up the streets with a power hose. That kind of rhetoric has drawn the wrath of immigrants and activists who have demanded the minister's resignation. Efforts to curb the violence by beefing up police deployments have failed to curb the violence, and there are growing calls for the government to try a different approach. Jeremy Austin, TVB News.
In the U.S., an engineer at a California defense contractor and 3 others have been indicted on charges of stealing American military secrets and trying to smuggle them to China. The engineer's brother, Mac Tai Wing, and his wife, both U.S. residents, were arrested last week in Los Angeles as they were about to board a flight to Hong Kong. The engineer, Mac Chi, and his wife, both naturalized U.S. citizens, were detained at their home. Mac Chi is the lead engineer in a classified research project involving quiet propulsion systems for U.S. Navy warships. He's accused of taking sensitive information about the project, copying it onto discs with his wife's help and giving it to his brother to take to China. The four are charged with theft of government property, conspiracy, and transportation of stolen goods. To Malaysia now, where hundreds of people have been evacuated from the Petronas Towers after a fire erupted in a shopping mall there. Authorities have ruled out arson. The blaze broke out at around midnight last night. The fire forced the evacuation of up to 800 people, most of them moviegoers in a cinema complex. No injuries were reported. Back locally, potential homeowners and buyers were cautious as the first batch of units went on sale today, following a move by local banks to raise interest rate. 2 came in karate do events and 1 in women's rowing. That takes their medal tally to 12. And in men's basketball, Japan scored an upset 68-60 win over China in the semifinals. Jameson Wong reports.
Semifinals, and Japan got off to a quick start. Kei Ikarashi gave the Great Wall defense fits. Japan led at the break 35-27. Down big in the second half, the Chinese squad came back to cut the lead to 5 points. Yi Jianyan had 14 points but fouled out with 5 minutes to go. Ikarashi led Japan with 19 points. They will meet Chinese Taipei for the gold medal on Sunday. Jameson Wong, TVB News.
And tonight, China were out for revenge in the semifinals of the soccer competition. Gao Lin opened the scoring in the 42nd minute, heading in a curling free kick from Lu Lin. Japan equalized in the second half on a Shingo Akimini header. In stoppage time, Chinese captain Du Wei went high to put home the winner. China took it 2-1 and will meet North Korea in the final tomorrow after they defeated South Korea. And a look at the weather before we go. It'll be mainly fine tomorrow. Temperatures will range between 24 and 29 degrees. That's all from the newsroom. Thanks for now. Thanks for joining us. Good night.